Alright guys, so you're gonna need to install a program called VS Code to start building / creating websites. Now VS Code is a program that is used to build websites and apps. Alright, so you're gonna need to go to Google and type VS Code. VS, by the way, stands for Visual Studio Code. VS Code download. You wanna go to Google and type that. And you wanna click on the first link that comes up. And you're gonna need to download the program for whatever operating system you're using. I'm using Windows, so you're gonna click Windows if you're using Windows, click Mac if you're using Mac. All right, but I already have the program downloaded and installed, so I'm not going to download it again. All right, so once you have the program installed, you wanna pin it into your taskbar and open it. Alright, this is VS Code, the program that is used to build / create websites. Alright, once you're here, you're gonna want to go to File and click on Open Folder, and you want to go to Documents, and in Documents you want to create a new folder. So this is the folder where you're going to be creating and building your website. So let's name the folder, let's name it My Websites. And you want to select the folder that you just created and go on Save. Just click Yes, I trust. Alright, once you have the folder opened, you want to create a new file. Name it index.html. Now, index.html is the home page of every website. The .html extension tells your computer that, okay, this is a website, so that when you open it, it should be rendered as a website. Now, if you go to My Documents and open the index.html file that we just created, you'll see that it looks like a web page already. All right, even the look of it, the icon looks like a web page. All right, so let's just leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Websites and apps are built using programming languages, aka codes. Now, a programming language, aka code, is a bunch of text that translates into something beautiful that users can see and interact with. All right, so to make that meaningful, I'm going to go to Facebook and I'm going to right click. By the way, you don't have to understand what I'm doing right now. You'll understand it as we dive deep into the course. So I'm going to right click on the Facebook login button and click Inspect. All right, so to make what I said meaningful, look at this bunch of text here. All right, so this is code. All right, this is called code in technical terms. All right, so like I said, code, aka programming language, is a bunch of text that translates into something beautiful that users can see and interact with. All right, so what you see here is this code, which represents this button, or which renders into this button. All right, and you'll see it has this login text here. If I change it, let's just change it to sign in, you'll see it changes accordingly. And if you take a closer look on the bottom right corner of your screen, of my screen, sorry, you'll see that this button, aka code, all right, we're looking here, all right, so we see it as code. All right, so this button has a background color of blue, which is that. So if I change that background color, let's just say sorry, I want to edit that. Yeah, if I change it to red, you'll see changes to red, changes to blue. All right, all right, so what you see here are the languages that you need to learn, the coding languages that you need to learn in order to be able to build websites. All right, so the first language is HTML and the second language is CSS. So I'll be teaching you these languages throughout this course, and by the time you finish the course, you'll be able to build any website layout from scratch. All right, so again, HTML, CSS, HTML. These two coding languages work hand in hand to render what you see here, right? To build websites, all right? So think of HTML as a building material for building a website. And think of CSS as the language that you use to style and position elements within a website. By styling, I mean like changing background colors, font sizes, font colors, and stuff like that. All right. So just remember that. Just hammer what I just said now into your head. HTML works hand in hand with CSS to build websites. All right. So these are the languages that you use to build websites. All right. Now what you see here, the building material, by the way, building material is like just a term that I use for beginners. In technical terms, what you see here is called tags, HTML tags. All right, so you always want to check out w3schools.com/html to know which tags to use to build what. For example, let's see, you'll see that you use the image tag to render images within a website. All right, and you'll see you use let's see, and you'll see use the button tag to render buttons within a website. All right, so w3schools.com/html provides a general guidance on how to use HTML, but you are never going to be able to understand this on your own. All right, hence I'm here with this course, all right, to teach you how this works together and links together. All right, so yeah, so you just bookmark this, add this to your bookmarks, Control D, and it will be added up here. All right, so you want to bookmark w3schools.com/html and w3schools.com/tags. Now w3schools.com/html just provides a general guidance on how to use HTML and its tags, and w3schools.com/tags provides a list of tags, all right, that you're gonna need to know. All right, for example, like I said, you use the button tag to render a button, and let's see what else. Trying to use things that will make sense at this point. All right, for example, again, another example, you use the a tag to render a link to another page, right? So you see, this is a link which takes you to a different website. All right, so this is a list of tags, aka the building material, all right, that you use to build websites. And don't worry about understanding all of them at this point. All right, they'll just get hammered into your head as you practice along with me, as you practice and play around with me throughout the course. You don't have to memorize them, all of them for now. No. All right, so like, and don't let them overwhelm you. I know this seems like a lot, but you're not gonna be using most of these tags here. Like, I think most of the times you use you just use what you need for the type of a website that you need. All right. All right, like I said, just keep these in your bookmarks. Control D to add them into your bookmarks, because we're gonna be referencing them throughout the course. All right, just remember to bookmark these two web pages, the w3schools/html page and the w3schools.com/tags page. All right, so just Control D to bookmark them, and they will be shown up here, so that next time you want to access them, we can access them without having to type this entire URL in the URL bar. I can just click here. All right, so just remember to bookmark those pages. All right, now that we've learned about the button tag, among other tags that we still need to learn about, let's go ahead now and create/build a button within our first website. All right, so the term create and build are used interchangeably in the world of web development. All right, now let's create slash build a button in our very first website. Remember, it's blank for now. Right, so we want to add that button, and let's change the text to, for testing purposes, let's change it to login. Now if we go ahead and open our website from the folder that we created on the previous tutorial, now we have this button here, log in. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Now we have this button, this ugly looking button here. I bet you've never seen a button that looks this ugly. So now the question is, how do we style it and make it look nice and make it look like the normal buttons that we've seen on other websites, like for example Facebook, the Facebook login page. Let's go back to Facebook. All right, how do we change the background color and the font size? All right, so this is where CSS comes in. Remember I said CSS is used to style and position elements within a website. By styling, I mean like changing background colors, font sizes, font colors, and stuff like that. All right, so this is where CSS comes in, because like the HTML elements on their own will look ugly and unappealing. All right, so how do we use CSS? Back to w3schools.com/this/css. all right, so you want to click on that tab. You might want to bookmark this page as well, so that it's easy to reference. You can find it on your bookmarks. All right, so the way CSS works is as follows. It's like this. All right, so you have what we call a selector, which is the element that you want to style. All right, in this case the button. In this case, want to style the button. Change, by styling again, I mean changing the look and feel of this login button. All right, so that is the selector, the element that you want to style. And then we've got so you open your curly braces, and then you use what you call a property. So the property is the thingy that you want to change. In this case, in this example, they're changing the color. All right, the font color of this header. This is a header tag, by the way. We'll learn more about it throughout the course. All right, so they're changing the color, they're setting it to blue. So the property always goes with a value. All right, and they're changing the font size, which is the property, and they're setting the value to 12 pixels. All right, now using this syntax that we've seen in this example. So syntax is like in simple terms, the way in which things are done in the world of web development. So using this syntax, let's go ahead and style our login button. All right, so one thing W3 Schools forgot to mention is that you're gonna want to open a style tag whenever we want to use CSS like that. All right, so we need to open a style tag. By the way, there's different ways to initiate CSS, but let's just start with the simple way for now. So you want to target the button, want to style the button. All right, so remember the selector. Where were we? So we've got the selector, which is the element that we want to style. After the selector, we open the curly brace, like that. All right, so we've opened the curly braces, and what you want to do now is to specify the property, right, that we want to change or set. All right, in this case, let's start with the background. All right, so there's different properties, CSS properties, that you need to learn, and all of them are listed here. So for doing different things, and we'll learn them. All right, in when we dive deep into the course. And again, don't let these scare you. Don't let them scare you away. I know they seem like a lot, but yeah, like they just get hammered into your head as you practice along and code along, and just it's all about practice. Don't try to memorize them right now. Yeah. All right, so we want to set the background color. So the background color, let's just say background background color. I want to set the background color to, let's say, let's say blue. All right, so setting the background color of this login button. Now, if we go back to our, I've got too much tabs open. Now, if we go back to our website, our button is blue, all right, because of the CSS that we just defined. All right. Next step, let's use the color property to change the color. In this case, let's set it to white, the color, and let's refresh. Now it's white. By the way, I'll show you a way for your changes to reflect without you having to refresh the browser, all right? Because it's gonna be tiring having to refresh the browser every time we make changes to see our changes reflecting. I'll show you a way for our changes to reflect without having to refresh the page. All right, so that is CSS. Now let's use one more property. Let's increase the font size. Let's set the font size to, let's say, 16 pixels, and you'll watch the font size grow if we go back to our web page. See, the font size has grown. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Just a quick summary. Okay, this is CSS. CSS is used to style and position elements within a website by styling, like changing background. By styling, I mean changing background colors, font sizes, font colors, and stuff like that. So you use properties to set the look and feel. In this case, they're setting the color to blue. They're setting the font size to 12. There's many other properties for doing different things, like controlling spaces, controlling borders, comments, and stuff like that. And we're gonna learn all these properties when we dive deep into the course. And they might seem like a lot, but they're not really a lot, and you don't have to know them all. Most of the times you're not gonna be, if you won't even be using like most of them. I would say you'll be using like 60 to 70% of them. So don't let this, what you see here on the sidebar, overwhelm you. It's not too much really, and don't try to memorize it. Don't let it scare you away. It just gets hammered into your head. The more you do it, the more you practice, the more you code, then you just get hammered into your head. All right. So again, properties. You use properties to change the look and feel. CSS properties, and their values. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, guys. So if you look at our website here, well, it doesn't have any title, any meaningful title. It just uses the file name that we created at the beginning of this tutorial. Just uses that as the title, and we don't want that. All right. If you look at W3 Schools, they have this title which is relevant to the page that you're currently on, and Facebook has the title as well, Facebook-login, and it will change depending on the page that you're on. And every other website that you visit will always have that title. Even Twitter has that title. All right, so to be able to add our own title here besides the default one, we need to we need to start our project with an HTML foundation / boilerplate. Now the HTML boilerplate is this. All right, so just go to W3 Schools homepage, the very first page on W3 Schools /HTML. Copy that. That's what we know as the HTML boilerplate. All right. So if W3 Schools changes their site and this is no longer on the homepage, you can just go to Google and type HTML boilerplate. You'll be able to find this HTML foundation, right? So this is what you need when you start. So you're gonna need this every time you start a new website. All right, it's like your foundation, your website foundation. All right, so let's just replace what we've been doing here for demoing purposes with what we've copied from W3 School, our HTML foundation. All right, so what goes in here? All right, so this is see what goes between the body tag is what the user will see here. It's what is the actual website content, what the user will see when they visit the website. All right, just remove these things they're from W3 schools for demoing purpose. Just remove that, we don't need it. All right, and then replace that with what we've been doing, or whatever you want to be the content of your site, whatever you want the user to see when they visit your site. All right, now this here kind of tells the browser, all right, okay, this is an HTML document, all right, and you should render it as such, and the rest of the stuff is just for search engines. All right, so this is now where we add our title, or let's just say my best website dash home. All right, now if we go back to our website and refresh, now the title has changed accordingly. So now if we want to preview our site, we need to minimize the VS Code program, maximize, minimize, maximize to switch back between the two windows. What I want to do is I want them to display side by side, sort of like this. All right, so we can kind of preview our changes without having to minimize the VS Code program. All right, so for that I'm going to let's use the desk pins program. So I'm going to pin Google Chrome on top of the screen so that it appears on above everything else. Right now I can click on both windows without having to minimize one of them. All right, and I'm going to drag, let's just drag that over to the left and drag that a little bit over to the right. Now the VS Code program and the browser are appearing side by side. Now we won't have to like kind of minimize, maximize, minimize to preview the changes that we're making. All right, let's leave it here for now. I think that's what I wanted to show you for this part of the tutorials. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. And another minor problem that we have is that whenever we make changes to our site, we have to refresh the browser for the changes to reflect. All right, and we add new changes, they don't reflect until we refresh the browser. So we don't want to keep on refreshing the browser in order to preview our changes. All right, so for that we're going to need to install a VS Code extension. All right, that will let us preview our changes without refreshing the browser. It will sort of refresh the browser automatically. All right, so for that you want to go to file, let's see, preferences, extensions, and here you want to search for live server and you want to install it. It's installing. Right, just installed successfully. I think for it to take effect we need to restart the VS Code program. Close it and open it again. Now just move that to the left. All right, now for us to preview our changes without having to refresh the browser, you want to right click on the window and open with live server. This option will show up as soon as you install the live server extension. Without the live server extension, or without installing the live server extension, you won't have this option here. Now click on open with live server. Right, and here we go. You can just close the old window. Let's drag that over to the left, and now if we make change, let's just remove that. See, we didn't have to refresh the browser, it just auto refreshed. And we can remove the sign up button as well. That was for testing purposes. Right now we only have the login button. All right, so that is the live server extension. Keep that in mind. It lets you preview your changes without having to refresh the browser. All right, so every time you make changes, it will save them and sort of refresh the browser for you. Right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Now that we know how HTML works with CSS, or how CSS interact with HTML tags or elements. By the way, tags, I use the term tags and elements interchangeably to refer to this, the button, for example, the button tag or the button element. All right, so we know how CSS interact with the tags to style them, position them, and change them change their background colors. Like we've seen here, for example, that we targeted this button tag and we've styled it and changed its background color and its font size. Now let's take a look at some of the most commonly used HTML tags / elements. Right, just remember that I use those terms interchangeably to refer to the HTML building material, which is all the stuff that we use to build websites. All right. Also, for that, we're gonna need to minimize that, and let's minimize everything else. All right, so here are the most commonly used HTML tags. Yeah, so I've got the nav tag, which is used for building website navigations, all right, something like this. And we've got the image tag, which is used to render images within a website. And we've got the input tag, which we use to render an input field, basically, where the user can input their name, phone number, surname, whatever. Whenever you see something like this, just know it's an input tag. All right, and then we've got the select tag, which we use to render a drop-down list where a user can select from a list of default options like countries, cities, or anything like that. All right, so now okay, these are the most commonly used HTML tags. I bet you've seen them already in different kinds of websites, as well as the button tags. The button is also one of the most commonly used HTML tags. All right, now let's take a look at how we render the tags that we just discussed. All right, so you want to reference w3schools.com/tags. This is for you guys. I know this off the top of my head. You don't have to keep on referencing W3Schools. All right, so just go to w3schools.com/tags, which is this page that we bookmarked here on the previous tutorials. And here I want to go to the nav tag and read more about it. I can't find it now. All right, let me actually search it up. Nav. All right, here it is. You want to click on the nav tag, and so here you see how you render it. All right, so let me just copy that and back to our website. All right, so here we go. All right, so let me just explain this to you. All right, so we've got, so this is the opening nav tag, and this is the closing nav tag. All right, and then we've got an a tag here, which is a link, generates a link. All right, and what goes in here is the page that you want to be taken to when the user or the page that you'd like the user to be taken to when they click on that link. And again, what goes in here is the page that the user will be taken to when they click on that link. All right, let's actually change that to contact us about us, our services, more about us. All right, so that is the nav tag. You can copy it from W3Schools. I don't have to copy it from W3Schools. I know the syntax off the top of my head, but I just copied it for you guys, right? So yeah, like if you don't want to type this whole thing out, just copy it from W3Schools. Right, so that is the nav tag. Now let's take a look at the image tag. Now the image tag is as follows. Like you can also look it up on W3Schools image tag, and it goes with the source. Now the source attribute is where the image is, like it's pointing to a path from where you want to render the image, and you always want to close the tag. All right, let's just search for any image on the internet. Let's just random images. Let's copy that. I want the URL of this image. Let's say open link in the new tab. I don't know, we want the image link, not the article. Right, now we've got the image link, we can just use it here. Right, so we just pasted the link Now if we refresh, now we have that image. All right, but it's too large. All right, let's just remove it. Actually, we don't need it for now, right? But that is how the image tag work to render images within a website. And now we've got the input tag among the most commonly used tags. All right, so the input tag goes as follows: input I want to close it. Oops, sorry. Input. Now what's happening here? Input. Now there we go. Right, and an input tag always goes, not always, but you can give it a placeholder. The placeholder is what will be displayed here, like kind of in gray. Enter your name. Right, so that is the input tag. Right, now let's take a look at the select tag, which is also among the most commonly used tags in HTML. So I want to go to W3 Schools and search for the select. So as you work like with build more websites, practice along all these tags, you'll know, not all of them, but you'll know the majority of them. You don't have to know all of them because you won't be using all of them most of the time. So just need to know like the ones that you're going to be using most of the times. Right, so let's take a look at the select tags and how it's rendered. All right, so let's just copy that, and you don't always have to copy. You can type this out from scratch. It's up to you. If you know the syntax off the top of your head, you don't have to copy. Right, so that is the select tag. Choose a car, then the label. It's just to give it a like this select like a meaning, like what are you doing? You're choosing a car. All right, and by the way, let's not remove the input tag. Why did I remove it? Input. I only removed the image because it was too large and taking up too much space. Let's keep the input there, and with the placeholder, let's just say name, as we see on the Facebook login page. But there's placeholders. All right, so those are the most commonly used HTML tags. Now it's time to have a look at the most commonly used CSS properties. Like by CSS properties, I mean these things that you use to control the look and feel of a website: font sizes, background colors, and stuff like that. All right. By the way, color is used to change the font color, right? Just that we don't have a font color property. We use the color to change a font color. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, guys, so before we look at the most commonly used CSS properties, let's first have a look and talk about the most commonly used HTML tag, the div tag. All right, so the div tag is used to divide websites or a website into different sections and subsections and group elements within those sections. All right, so to make what I just said meaningful, let me just go to I want to go to youtube.com. Right, let me just maximize my window. So if you go to youtube.com and right click and inspect elements, you're gonna see that we've got that div which they use to group all the elements that you see here at the top. And if you right click on the left hand side, you'll see they've got that this div, right, which they use to group elements on the left hand side of the YouTube website. And they've got other divs as well. As you can see, like every website is like populated with divs all over. You see they use this div to like group elements within this video, and they probably have a div to group the categories as well. You see they've got that div which they use to group the categories. All right, guys, so this is the visual presentation of all the divs that were used to create the main YouTube layout. So I've got that div and that, the sidebar, and the div which contains the main content. Think of a div as like a container that is used to group elements together to make a website layout. And we've got that div that groups categories together. You can't see the divs themselves, but you can see the content kind of follows, like it is grouped in accordance to those divs, these divs that I just showed you. All right. So I've got that, the header, the sidebar, the main content, and that div that they used to group the categories. By the way, W3 Schools suggests that you use the aside tag to build the sidebar, and they say you should use the nav and the nav or the header tag to build the header. But you don't always have to use the aside to build the sidebar. You can use a div, and you don't always have to use the header or the nav tag to build the header. You can use a div. It's just a matter of personal preference. Don't think it really matters. All right, so yeah, that is the div tag. You can see the point. It's like, I think for at this point you can kind of see how important it is, in that is it's used to like create the main layout of a site. And inside this main div here in green that you see in green, probably have other divs as well that are used to group content and do different things within this main layout. And inside this div as well, we probably have other divs as well. For example, we have a div for this picture, for example, a div that is used to create to host this picture, the title of the video, like everything that you see within this video. All right, so that is the div tag, and again, that is the site without like the visual colors, but the content, you can see it follows like what you see here. All right, so that is the div tag, is the most commonly used HTML tag, and it's like when building website layouts. All right, now let's take a look at how the div works practically. All right, so I want to open and close the div tag. All right, remember every tag always have like an opening and a closing tag. This is to like kind of tell the page where that this is where the div begins and this is where it ends. All right, so the div tag on its own won't have any effect on your site until you add content to it and style it with CSS. All right, so for testing purposes, let's just say the content goes here. Right, so now we have that, but you can't really see the div itself. All right, so to actually see the div, let's just give it a background color. By the way, you don't always have to like give it a background color. Like I said, it's just used to group elements within the web page and like create sections. You don't always have to give it a background color. Let's just say, for testing purposes, so that we can see what we're doing, let's give it a background color of gray. All right, and now let's give it a width. By the way, the width is the distance from left to right, and the height is the distance from top to bottom. Right, so let's give it a width of let's say 250 pixels, and let's set the height to, let's say, 600 pixels. That's too much. Let's just decrease it, let's say 400. All right, so that is the div tag. Like I said, it's used to group elements within a website. Like if I move one of these elements inside this div, you'll see it will actually be displayed inside that div. For example, let's just take the select and place it inside the div. Oops, sorry. Now you see that the select is inside the div. So remember, the div is used to divide websites into sections and group elements within the sections. Now, any content that you add inside this div will always be displayed inside this. Let's just add, for example, here, let's say a paragraph, a p tag, and let's just say this is for testing. And you see it appears inside the div tag, but the input tag appears outside because it's outside the div tag. Like if we move it inside the div tag, it should now be displayed inside the div tag. All right, so always remember that about the div. It is the most used HTML tag, right, to, like I said, to group elements within a website and create sections and subsections within a website. Right, guys, now let's take a look at the most commonly used CSS properties. Now remember, CSS properties are used to change / control the look and feel of your website, or the look and feel of your HTML elements. All right, so first up, we've got the text decoration property. We use the text decoration property to add or remove the underline to a text. Sometimes by default, some elements, for example, the link will have an underline. Sometimes you may want to remove that using the text decoration property. And then we've got the font size, which is self-explanatory. We use that to control the font size. All right, and then we've got the color. So we've got the color. We use the color to change the font color, right? Just note that we don't use font color. We use color to change the font color, but we don't have a font color property, which is strange. I think there should be font color, right? But CSS uses color, not font color, to change the font color, right? So that, just take note of that. And then we've got the background color, which is also self-explanatory. We use that to change a background color of an element. The width, we use the width to change the width of a property. Now the width is the distance from left to right of an element, right? And then we've got the height. The height is the distance from top to bottom. All right, and then we've got the padding, the margin. Before the padding, we've got the margin. The margin controls space around an element, the outer space around an element. All right, so you might want to change the margin left, which controls the space on the left hand side of an element, or the one may want to control the space on above the element, which controls. So we've got margin top, which controls the space above the element. We've got margin bottom, which controls the space on the bottom of the element. Right, we've got the padding, which works almost in a similar way as the margin, but the padding controls spaces between a container and its content. So if this was a website or a web page, so the container would be this white thing and the content would be the text. All right, and the padding also has like padding top, bottom, padding left, padding right. And then we've got the display property, which we use to specify whether an element should take up the entire space of its container. So by default, some elements will just take up the entire space of their container, of their parent container, and not leave any spaces for other content, right? Sometimes you may want to change that to open up more space for other elements. Right, so now that we've just looked at this, let's now take a look at how all of these properties work practically. I just wanted to explain them first in theory, and then we're gonna have a look at how they work in practical. All right, so let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, guys, now let's take a look at how the properties that we just discussed work practically. All right, so let's just first up, we want to let's just remove the select and the input tag. That was just for demoing purposes. All right, so let's start with the text decoration property. All right, so let's target all the links, all the A tags, and remove the underline. So remember, the text decoration property is used to set or remove the underline within a text. All right, so we want to say A, so we're targeting all the links, the A tags, and let's say text decoration and set it to none. Right, so that just removed the underline. If you want to set it, you can just say text decoration underline, which is the default style, by the way. All right, let's just remove that. Text decoration none, set it back to none. All right, now let's set the font size. Remember, the font size is used to control the font size. It's self-explanatory. Font size, let's say 24 pixels. I think that's a bit too much. Let's say maybe 18. That's too small. All right, it's 23 pixels. All right, that's better. All right, next up, let's take a look at the background color property. All right, so for the background color, I want to target the nav, right? I want to give the entire navigation a background color of, let's say, lime green. Say, so now this will set the background color of the navigation, which is if we right click and hover over the nav, you can see the nav itself. All right, so I want to set the background color of the nav itself. So let's just say the background color is lime green. All right, now let's change the color of the of all the links of the a tags. Let's say color, let's set it to white. Right now, and then we've got the padding, which we use to control the space between the container and its content. All right, in this case the container is the nav, which is that in lime green, and the content is the text or the links. All right, so for that we want to set the paddings first. Remember, we've got the padding left, which controls the space between the content and the container on the left hand side. Padding left, let's set it to 15 pixels. All right, now let's set the padding bottom, padding bottom, let's set it to 15 pixels as well. That opens up more space between the content and the container on the bottom, right? Now set the padding top, let's set it to 15 pixels as well. Right, now we see the difference. All right, so that is the padding, controls the space between the content and the container. All right, and we've got different like properties, sub properties for padding left, padding bottom, padding top, which are kind of self-explanatory. Padding top controls the padding at the top, padding bottom, padding at the bottom, padding left, padding on the left. All right, and what else did we discuss? Let's see, the background color, we dealt with that. And the margin, remember that I said the margin controls a space, the space around an element. So we've got the margin top, margin left, margin bottom. All right, for example, if I set the margin top, let's say like 25 pixels, that will move the entire nav 25 pixels away from the window, the entire window. All right, and if we set the margin bottom, let's set it to, let's say, 40 pixels. Now I've got an extra space of 40 pixels below the nav. All right, all right, what else did we discuss? I think let's just leave it here for now, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Among the most commonly used CSS properties, we've got the height property, which you use to set the height of an element. By height, I mean the distance from top to bottom. All right, you can say height, let's say 60 pixels, which will make our navigation look ugly. We don't always use, we don't normally use the height on navs. We use that on the divs, right, to set the height of the divs. All right, so let's use the div to demonstrate the height property. All right, so first up, let's set the background color of the div. Remember, the div is a divider which is used to create sections and subsections within a website and group elements within the subsections and the sections. All right, so let's set the background color of the div to, let's say, lime gray. We don't have that color. Let's just say gray. right? Now there we go. All right. Oh, I think we've demonstrated the height already and the width. All right. So we've demonstrated those on the previous tutorials, but you can just increase them for testing purposes, for demoing purposes. Now you'll see the width will actually increase. We increase the height as well. Let's say by 10 pixels. You will notice the height increasing. All right. So that is the height and the width of the elements. All right. And now let's take a look at the display property. Now, remember I said the display property specifies whether an element should take up an entire space of its container or not. All right, so you'll notice if I add, let's say, more content outside this div, you'll notice it doesn't appear here. It doesn't appear side by side with this div. That's because the div by default always takes up the entire space of its container. You see this div, even though it's we've set the width to 280 pixels, it's still taking up the entire space of its container. To demonstrate that better, let's just inspect and hover over the div. You'll see this is the width part, and then this is the div itself taking up the entire container. So the grayish part is the width that we just set, and I don't know what color that is, but the color on the right hand side is still the div taking up the entire space of the window. All right, so to change that, we use the display property, and say display. So we want to say display inline block. Now you'll see the text appears side by side with the div. All right, so just remember that whenever you want element to appear side by side, you always use the display inline block property. All right, now the div will no longer take up the entire space of its container, but it will open up more space for other elements. All right, so the default value for the div and the display property is block. Block means that the element should always take up the entire space of its container and force any subsequent elements to display below it. All right, just remember that. So this is very important, by the way. This is one of the most important properties that you're gonna need to know in order to be able to build website layouts. All right, so display block means that the element will push subsequent elements below it to display below it. All right, for example, here we see that this text below, displays below this div, but as soon as we set that to inline block, it displays side by side with the div. All right, just remember the display property. It's one of the most important, if not the most important property when it comes to building a website layout. It's the most important property. All right, guys, now let's take a look at how the properties that we just discussed work practically. All right, so let's just first up, we want to let's just remove the select and the input tag. That was just for demoing purposes. All right, so let's start with the text decoration property. All right, so let's target all the links, all the A tags, and remove the underline. So remember, the text decoration property is used to set or remove the underline within a text. All right, so we want to say A, so we're targeting all the links, the A tags, and let's say text decoration and set it to none. Right, so that just removed the underline. If you want to set it, you can just say text decoration underline, which is the default style, by the way. All right, let's just remove that. Text decoration none, set it back to none. All right, now let's set the font size. Remember, the font size is used to control the font size. It's self-explanatory. font size, let's say 24 pixels. I think that's a bit too much. Let's say maybe 18. That's too small. All right, it's 23 pixels. All right, that's better. All right, next up, let's take a look at the background color property. All right, so for the background color, I want to target the nav, right? I want to give the entire navigation a background color of, let's say, lime green. Say, so now this will set the background color of the navigation, which is, if we right click and hover over the nav, you can see the nav itself. All right, so I want to set the background color of the nav itself. So let's just say the background color is lime green. All right, now let's change the color of the of all the links of the a tags. Let's say color, let's set it to white. Right now, and then we've got the padding, which we use to control the space between the container and its content. All right, in this case, the container is the nav, which is that in lime green, and the content is the text or the links. All right, so for that, we want to set the paddings first. Remember, we've got the padding left, which controls the space between the content and the container on the left hand side. Padding left, let's set it to 15 pixels. All right, now let's set the padding bottom, padding bottom, let's set it to 15 pixels as well. That opens up more space between the content and the container on the bottom, right? Now set the padding top, let's set it to 15 pixels as well. Right, now we see the difference. All right, so that is the padding, controls the space between the content and the container. All right, and we've got different like properties, sub properties for padding left, padding bottom, padding top, which are kind of self-explanatory. Padding top controls the padding at the top, padding bottom, padding at the bottom, padding left, padding on the left. All right, and what else did we discuss? Let's see, the background color, we dealt with that. And the margin, remember that I said the margin controls a space, the space around an element. So we've got the margin top, margin left, margin bottom. All right, for example, if I set the margin top, let's say like 25 pixels, that will move the entire nav 25 pixels away from the window, the entire window. All right, and if we set the margin bottom, let's set it to, let's say 40 pixels. Now I've got an extra space of 40 pixels below the nav. All right, all right, what else did we discuss? I think let's just leave it here for now, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Among the most commonly used CSS properties, we've got the height property, which you use to set the height of an element. By height, I mean the distance from top to bottom. All right, you can say height, let's say 60 pixels, which will make our navigation look ugly. We don't always use, we don't normally use the height on navs. We use that on the divs, right, to set the height of the divs. All right, so let's use the div to demonstrate the height property. All right, so first up, let's set the background color of the div. Remember, the div is a divider which is used to create sections and subsections within a website and group elements within the subsections and the sections. All right, so let's set the background color of the div to, let's say lime gray. We don't have that color. Let's just say gray. Right now, there we go. All right. Oh, I think we've demonstrated the height already and the width. All right, so we've demonstrated those on the previous tutorials, but you can just increase them for testing purposes, for demoing purposes. Now you'll see the width will actually increase. We increase the height as well, let's say by 10 pixels. You will notice the height increasing. All right, so that is the height and the width of the elements. All right, and now let's take a look at the display property. Now remember, I said the display property specifies whether an element should take up an entire space of its container or not. All right, so you'll notice if I add, let's say, more content outside this div, you'll notice it doesn't appear here. It doesn't appear side by side with this div. That's because the div by default always takes up the entire space of its container. You see this div, even though it's we've set the width to 280 pixels, it's still taking up the entire space of its container. To demonstrate that better, let's just inspect and hover over the div. You'll see this is the width part, and then this is the div itself taking up the entire container. So the grayish part is the width that we just set, and I don't know what color that is, but the color on the right hand side is still the div taking up the entire space of the window. All right, so to change that, we use the display property, and say display. So we want to say display inline block. Now you'll see the text appears side by side with the div. All right, so just remember that whenever you want element to appear side by side, you always use the display inline block property. All right, now the div will no longer take up the entire space of its container, but it will open up more space for other elements. All right, so the default value for the div and the display property is block. Block means that the element should always take up the entire space of its container and force any subsequent elements to display below it. All right, just remember that. So this is very important, by the way. This is one of the most important properties that you're gonna need to know in order to be able to build website layouts. All right, so display block means that the element will push subsequent elements below it to display below it. All right, for example, here we see that this text displays below this div, but as soon as we set that to inline block, it displays side by side with the div. All right, just remember the display property. It's one of the most important, if not the most important property when it comes to building a website layout. It's the most important property. Well, hello there, and welcome to the most interesting section of this course. So in this section, we're going to be building this website right here. So this is a real world website. As you can see, we've got our services section. We've got, let's see, we've got the about us section and testimonials from the customers. All right, so we're going to be assuming that we're building this website for a company by the name of Green Sword. All right, and you see we've got these links on the navigation, which takes us to different pages on the site. If you click on the about us, you'll be taken to the about us page, where you can read more about the company we'll be building this website for. All right, so this is the about us page. As you can see, we've got more features here, which means we're going to be using more CSS and HTML. I've got like a grid layout, which we're gonna be learning more about as we dig deeper into the course. All right, so I've got like these testimonials again, and we go to the contact us. Now this is the contact us page. All right, you can see we've got a form here, so we're going to be using the HTML input tags, which we've learned about in the previous tutorial. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one where we start building this website. All right, and by the way, from now onwards, from this section onwards, we're gonna be building real world websites. We won't be just playing around with the basics. We're done with the basics now. We're gonna be learning more advanced HTML and CSS techniques as we dive deeper into the course, like on the fly. All right, so let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, so before we go ahead and start building the Green Sword website, let's take a look at how you build a foundational structure of a website. So before you build the fancy content and everything else, you need to be able to picture / visualize the website without any content, like this. All right, so what you see here is what I call the skeleton version of a website. All right, so before you even begin building your fancy layout and everything else, the colors and everything else, you need to be able to like picture / visualize your website without any content. All right, so what you see here is a foundational structure of every website. So these are the tags that are generally used when building the foundational structure of a website. I don't always have to use all of these, like this is just an example. All right, so we are on W3 Schools, by the way, w3schools.com/html under the HTML layout section. All right, so W3 Schools suggests that you should use the header tag for the top part of your website and the nav tag for the navigation. So the navigation is this is now the nav part. All right, and sometimes you can put your nav inside the header, which is what we're going to be doing for this particular kind of a website. So the nav is inside the header. All right, and then we've got like sections, multiple sections within the site, and then finally we've got a footer. So if I scroll down, I scroll down, now this is the footer. What you see here on the very last part of the site with the copyright and everything else is the footer. All right, let's just scroll back up and back to W3 Schools. All right, so by the way, you don't always have to use this like these tags, sections, article, whatever. You can use divs, right, to create sections within your website. Like I said on the previous tutorial, like I said, a div, aka the divider, is used to create sections within your website and like divide the sections and group the content within your sections. So you don't always have to use the section tag or the article tag. You can use the div, but W3 Schools just suggests this because like it's I think it's good for search engine optimization and stuff like that. Right, but for starters, we'll just use the div tag to create our the multiple sections within our website. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. We're gonna start building the header and the navigation. Right, let's leave it here. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Right, so what you see is everything that we've been doing for demoing purposes, like the basics of HTML and CSS. All right, so what I've done is I've moved everything else that we've been doing over to the demo folder inside the websites folder under documents. All right, so what we want to do now is want to create a new folder under my website, under my documents, my websites. So here in this directory, we want to create a new folder, and let's name it Green Sword, which is the name of the site that we're going to be building. Create and select add to workspace. All right, so want to select the Green Sword folder and click that icon to add a new file, and want to name the file index.html as usual. Remember, index.html is like the home page of every website. All right, now you'll see if I punch in anything here, let's just say welcome to Green Sword, you'll see that will start displaying on the browser. You see now we've got that welcome to Green Sword, which is just a blank website for now. The end goal is to rebuild something like this. All right, so by the way, whenever you build websites as a website developer, you're gonna like be given a picture of what you need to build if you're working for a company. If you are self-employed and you're building websites for your own clients, what you're gonna need to do is you'll need to hire a designer, and the designer will design the layout for you. So there are people who just deal with designing websites. They don't build the website, they just design and give you a picture. All right, and then what you do as a web developer, as a website developer, you convert the picture into the actual website. All right, so you're gonna be like, for now, let's assume this is the picture of the website that we need to build. Then we're going to be building what we see into an actual website. All right, so so now we've got this blank page here, the Green Sword website, which is just blank for now. So we just removed that that demo content that we added. So if we go back now, it's removed. All right, so from the previous tutorials, we learned that whenever you're building a new website, you always want to go to w3schools.com/html, and on the very first page, the home page, you want to scroll down and find this. This is what I call a foundation of every website. This is known as an HTML boilerplate, by the way. So if W3 Schools like changes their homepage and this is no longer here, you can just go to Google and search for HTML boilerplate, copy this, and you want to copy and paste it over to your new website. All right, and you want to remove that. That is just for like demoing purposes, the default content from W3 Schools. All right, right, like I said on the previous tutorials, like everything that's within the body tag is what the user will see when they visit the website. And this entire thing here, think of it as your website foundation. Like every website starts like this. If we go to youtube.com, for example, let's go to YouTube. So I want to go to youtube.com, and you want to, oops. So you want to right click and inspect. So if you inspect and hide everything else, you'll see that even YouTube has got that doc type tag, the HTML tag, and the body tag and the head. All right, so that is like what you see here is what we have. Oops, what's happening? All right, what is what we have here, the foundation of every website. All right, so just remember that this is the foundation of every website. Every website begins like this. You can right click and inspect on any website, you'll see this, and like I said, what goes inside the body tag is what the user will see. All right, so what think of the body tag, like everything inside the body tag, as the actual website, the actual content. All right, and as you can see, the site is empty for now because like we don't have anything on the body tag. Now if we go ahead and add something on the body tag, let's just say this is the Green Sword website. You'll see that that will actually be displayed. Right. Oh, for some reason my live server doesn't refresh. I have to refresh manually, but guess I'll have to fix that later. Right, so that is the Green Sword website. For now it's still blank. Right, so what we want to do next is to start building the navigation. All right, let's just maximize that a little bit. I want to start building the header and the navigation, and for that we're going to be referencing what you see here. Right, so I want to start with the header. All right, let's remove this and build our header tag. All right, and it won't have any effect by default because it's just an empty tag. Right, what we want to do next, like I said, we want to put the nav inside the header, all right, for this type of a website. But we've learned on the previous tutorials that whenever you want to build a navigation, something like this, let's just maximize that a little bit. All right, so whenever you want to build a navigation, something like this, you use the nav tag. We've referenced that from W3 Schools, and you can just click on try to see what it looks like. All right, you can see it's a navigation. So you can either type it out, the whole thing, or copy from W3 Schools and modify it as per your website. All right, so let's just minimize that. So I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to replace the default content with our own content, right? The content that matches our design. All right, this design. All right. All right, so I've got home, about, services, and contact us. And we can remove these, we don't need them. Now to go back to the site, now have these navigation links. All right, let's just minimize this to make things easy. What you want to do next is to, with CSS, want to set the background color of our header tag. All right, as you have seen on the previous tutorials, we want to use CSS and want to style it. So want to style the nav tag, and remember, whenever you want to use CSS, you open your style tag and your closing style tag. All right, and again, remember, CSS is used to style your website by styling, I mean, changing background colors, font sizes, and positioning elements within your website. All right, so for that, for styling the header tag, want to target the header tag by name, and let's set the background color to, for testing purposes, let's just say red. Right, this is just for testing purposes. Now you see we've got that red navigation. All right, but you don't want to use red as our color. We want this color. All right, so for that, to get this color, you want to use the Google Chrome color picker extension. You can always just download it from Google Chrome, sorry, from Google, and install it on Google Chrome. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. All right, so by the way, this Google Chrome color picker extension doesn't work on local files, so you're gonna have to load the picture that will be given to you by your designer onto your Google Drive, and then start picking the colors that you need. All right, so I'm going to click left click on the header, on the design. Now we're looking at the design. So as soon as I right click it, the Google Chrome color extension gives me the hex value of the color, and the hex value is always prefixed by the hash. All right, back to our site, and want to replace the red with that color, the color that we got from Google Chrome. And when I paste, and always remember to prefix the hex value with a hash. And now if we go back and refresh, see, now I've got that color. All right, and now let's change the colors of the links, of the navigation links. All right, so we want to set the color to let's say white for the navigation links. So we want to say, by the way, there's two ways to do this. You can target the A tags by their names, all right, and set the color to, remember, use the color property to change the font color, right? You don't have a font color in CSS, so use the color property. Right, so let's set the font color to white. Right, now this is not the perfect way of doing this, because like to be specific, to say that okay, we want the style only to affect these navigations, these links, only the links that are inside the nav tag. All right, so to do that, we're gonna say nav followed by the a tag. Now this style will only affect these links, only the links that are inside the nav tags. If we remove it, it will if we remove the nav, it will affect every link within this document. All right, now if we go back to our site and refresh, now the colors are white. All right, I think we've talked about the text decoration property on the previous tutorial, which we use to remove underlines within links. All right, so let's set the text decoration to none. That will remove the underlines now in our links. All right, and we've talked about the margin, which is used to control spaces within elements. Let's just say margin right, let's say 15 pixels. Let's see if that makes any major difference. I think 15 pixels is too much compared to this. Maybe it's not. Yeah, okay, let's leave it like that. But yeah, and then what we want to do next is like to increase the space between the content and the container. Right, by content I mean the links, and the container is the header. All right, so we talked about the padding, which we use to increase space, to control spaces between the content and the container. All right, so we want to set the padding to let's say in this case the container is the header. By the way, I hope you understand what I mean by padding. The padding is this space, right, and that space, the space below the links and the space above the links, the space between the content and the container. The container is the header, the blue header, and the content is the nav, right, the navigation, like the text itself. All right, so for that you want to say header padding, let's say top. Let's set it to 15 pixels. Now as soon as we set it, you'll see we've got now that extra space on the top between the text and the edge of the container, which is the header. And want to say padding bottom, set it to 15 pixels, and looks better. And now let's add more space now on the left hand side, right, between the text and the edge of the beginning of the container. All right. What we want to do next is to add more space between the container and the content on the right hand side. Again, the container is the header and the content is the text, the navigation. All right, so for that, again, going to use padding. Remember, anytime you want to control spaces between the container and the content, you use the padding. And let's set the padding to 15 pixels as well, padding left. All right, and now we have 15 pixels of space between the content and the container on the left hand side. Right, next I want to deal with the font, the font size. First, let's increase the font size of the links. All right, so for increasing the font size, we use the font size property. I think I counted that on the previous tutorials among the most commonly used CSS properties. Right, so let's set the font size to say 15 pixels. And let me see if I can, again, let me just minimize this and see if I can display this side by side with our code. Right, let me just, and right, I want to pin it on the top of the window so that it displays above everything else, so that won't have to minimize, maximize, and minimize. Right, so now the font size has increased a little bit. If we change it to 16, we should see it increasing again. There we go. And now we want to make the font size bold, because we've seen it's bold on the original design. And again, whenever you're building a website, if you're working for a company, they're going to give you a picture of the website that you need to build, and you're going to turn that picture into the actual website. If you're self-employed and you may be working as a freelancer, whatever, you're going to have to hire a designer, which is like pretty cheap. You won't have to spend much for that. It's very cheap. Hire a designer and they will design the website for you and then give you the picture of the website, and you as a website developer, you'll turn that picture into the actual website. All right, so in this case we're referencing this picture, all right, as our guide, our guideline for what we need to do. All right, back to our website. Now we see that the font size on the design is like bold, all right, and it's capital letters, it's all capital letters. Right, so for that, we're gonna use whenever you want to control the font, whether the font is bold or whatever, you're gonna use the font weight and set it to bold. Now you can see that our navigations are like, navigation links are bold. All right, now to change the font case, you see now it's like small letters, capital and small letters. You want to change everything into capital letters. All right, so for that we're gonna use let's see, the text transform property. By the way, all these properties are on W3 Schools /CSS. Like, you're gonna know them as you read. You can either read through all of these. You don't have to understand all of them like from the beginning. Like I said on the previous tutorials, they just get hammered into your head. The more you build more websites, the more you read, and yeah, they get hammered into your head. As for me, I know them by head, off the top of my head, because I've been building websites for some time now. All right, so you can read more about the text and text transform on w3schools.com/css. So everything that you see here is like here. You can just read more about it here on W3 Schools. All right, so we want to set the text transform into uppercase. Right now, if we go back to our site, you see everything is like in uppercase, which kind of resembles the design that we have. All right, we can leave these for now. We're gonna deal with them later. But what we do want to do is to render the logo, the green sword logo. All right, so if you go to any website and click on the logo, you'll see that it actually just refreshes the page, goes back to the home page actually. So let's go to W3 Schools. So if you click, this is the logo, W3 Schools logo. If you click on the logo, you'll see just takes you back to the home page. Even on, let's say, YouTube, if you click on YouTube, just like it's a link, as you can see, it's a link that takes you back to the home page. So wherever you were, it will take you back to the home page. Let's right click and inspect the logo. You'll see that it's a link. As you can see, they use an A tag. All right, so we also need to use an A tag, all right, to define the logo. Scroll back, we're still inside the header tag, and right before the nav we want to define our logo. And when I say href, by the way, the href attribute is where the user will be taken to when they click on that link. All right, which brings me to another point. We need to fix these. All right, by the way, all right, so we want to say a href. So if you want the link to take you to the home page, you can just like put the /. If you want to go to a different page, you can specify the page name here that you want to be taken to. All right. And you want to display the logo here, green sword. All right. And let's see. So it's pushing everything else below, it's forcing everything else to be displayed below it. All right. And that's because the nav tag is a block level element by default. So a block level element is an element that takes up the full space of its container and not open up more space for other elements. As you can see, if I right click on the nav, you'll see that it's taking up the whole space of the header tag. All right, so for that we're going to use the display property again, which we've talked about on the previous tutorial. So I want to change the nav. Let's target the nav and let's set the display property to inline. Right now it's no longer a block level element, it's no longer taking up the entire space of its container, right? It's displaying inline or side by side with the link, all right, the logo. All right, now let's increase the font size and the color, and so we need to increase the font size and change the color of our logo. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Alright guys, now let's go ahead and style the logo. So we want to increase the font size and set the color to white. So if you're wondering why like it doesn't match up with the rest of the links, see the rest of the links are white and it's not white. So if you're wondering why, that's because on the previous tutorials we said we only want the links that are inside the nav tag to be white and with the rest of these styles. All right, so the logo is not affected because it's not inside the nav tag, it's outside and it's inside the header tag. All right, and we want to style the logo differently than the rest of the links. All right, as you can see, the font size for the logo is huge. It's a little bit big compared to the other links. The font size is quite big. All right, whenever you want to style an element differently than other elements of the same type, you need to give it an ID, an identifier. So let's give the logo an ID of let's give it an ID of logo because it is a logo. All right, now when you style an element using an ID, you prefix the ID with the hash like that, and then go ahead and specify your styles. So in this case, we want to set the font size. So I'm going to exaggerate here a little bit. So let's just say 40 pixels. Right, now you see it only affects the logo but not the rest of the A tags. All right, so there is again the reason why we gave this logo an ID to style it is because we want to give it a different style than the rest of the links inside the header tag. If we were to say let me just remove that. If I said header A, that would affect all the links inside the header, and we don't want that. We only want the logo to have a bigger size. All right, if I say header A and font size 40 pixels, so that affects all the elements inside, all the A tags, A elements inside the header. All right, so this is why we gave the logo an ID. Right, you only want this particular style to affect the logo alone and not the rest of the styles here. Oh, by the way, this 40 was just for demonstration and exaggeration. Let me just make it say a little larger than the rest of the links. So the rest of the links are 16, I guess. Let's try 19 pixels. That's too small still. Let's say 30 pixels. Just compare that to the design, and let's just decrease it a little bit to, let's say, 27. All right, I think that's better. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Again and again, let me just reiterate here. Whenever you want to style an element differently than the rest of the elements with the same type, you use the ID. You give that element an ID. All right, so here we gave the logo a tag, then ID of logo. All right, so that we may be able to give it a style that will only apply to it alone and not to the rest of the links. Now let's go ahead and apply more styles to the logo. First step, we want to change the font color to white, so we can just copy that and paste. And what else? We want to remove the underline, so for that we're gonna use the text decoration and set it to none. And the font weight, I want to set it to bold. Looks better. All right, what else do we want? And now we want to add more space now between the logo and the navigation. So I want to open up this space. All right, so I'm going to do this using margin. This is not the right way of doing this, by the way. I'll show you a perfect way to do this when we dive deep into the course. So let's just say margin right. So want to open more space on the right hand side of the logo. And again, I just want to reiterate that this is not the perfect way of doing this. I'm just cheating basically. I'll show you the perfect way later on, and I'll explain why this is not the perfect way just now. Let's just set the margin right to 105 pixels. Now we have that space on the right hand side of the logo. All right, now the reason why I said this is not the right way / the perfect way of doing this, see, if I maximize my window, you see the navigation doesn't move along with my window, just stays on the same place. So I'll show you a way to fix that later on. All right, so next up, what we want to do next is to remove this space around the nav. As you can see on the design, the navigation is hitting the edges of the windows. All right, there's no space between the edges of the window and the navigation. Sorry. All right, so to fix that, we're gonna target the body tag. Right, by default the body tag has these margins, right, on the left, right, top, and the bottom. All right, so for that we're gonna target the body tag and let's say body and margin 0 pixels. Now perfect, that resembles the design. Now let's go ahead and apply more styles to the logo. First up, we want to change the font color to white, so we can just copy that and paste. And what else? We want to remove the underline, so for that we're gonna use the text decoration and set it to none. And the font weight, I want to set it to bold. Looks better. All right, what else do we want? And now we want to add more space now between the logo and the navigation. Also, I want to open up this space. All right, so I'm going to do this using margin. This is not the right way of doing this, by the way. I'll show you a perfect way to do this when we dive deep into the course. So let's just say margin right. So we want to open more space on the right hand side of the logo. And again, I just want to reiterate that this is not the perfect way of doing this. I'm just cheating basically. I'll show you the perfect way later on, and I'll explain why this is not the perfect way just now. Let's just set the margin right to 105 pixels. Now we have that space on the right hand side of the logo. All right, now the reason why I said this is not the right way / the perfect way of doing this, see, if I maximize my window, you see the navigation doesn't move along with my window, just stays on the same place. So I'll show you a way to fix that later on. All right, so next up, what we want to do next is to remove this space around the nav. As you can see on the design, the navigation is hitting the edges of the windows. All right, there's no space between the edges of the window and the navigation. Sorry. All right, so to fix that, we're gonna target the body tag. Right, by default, the body tag has these margins, right, on the left, right, top, and the bottom. All right, so for that, we're gonna target the body tag and say body and margin 0 pixels. Now, perfect. That resembles the design. All right, next up, we want to display this image, the banner image. This is known as the banner image, by the way. So whenever you see a website with a huge image like this below the header, just know that that image is called a banner image. All right, so what I want to do now is to render the banner image here. All right, let me just maximize my window, minimize. So all right, and we know from the previous tutorials that anytime you want to render an image, you use the image tag. You can read more about the image tag on w3schools.com. Right, so what goes in here is the path to the image. So the SRC stands for source. Right, so this is now a link to where the image is. This can either be this can point to your file on your local computer while you're still building the website. Once you publish the website to the live domain, to the internet, basically, so that everybody can access it, the image will have to be hosted on a live server. All right, so for now, let's point the source to this image. So I've just downloaded this banner image, and I'm going to point the source to that image. All right, sorry, this should be banner. All right, and like I said, this can point to any image on the internet or an image on your local directory, right? So now if we go back to our site, we now have this image. All right, we're gonna have to style it so that it looks better when we minimize the screen, but for now let's just leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, next up, we want to display this image, the banner image. This is known as the banner image, by the way. So whenever you see a website with a huge image like this below the header, just know that that image is called a banner image. All right, so what I want to do now is to render the banner image here. All right, let me just maximize my window, minimize. So all right, and we know from the previous tutorials that anytime you want to render an image, you use the image tag. You can read more about the image tag on w3schools.com. Right, so what goes in here is the path to the image. So the SRC stands for source. Right, so this is now a link to where the image is. This can either be this can point to your file on your local computer while you're still building the website. Once you publish the website to the live domain, to the internet, basically, so that everybody can access it, the image will have to be hosted on a live server. All right, so for now, let's point the source to this image. So I've just downloaded this banner image, and I'm going to point the source to that image. All right, sorry, this should be banner. All right, and like I said, this can point to any image on the internet or an image on your local directory, right? So now if we go back to our site, we now have this image. All right, let's just leave it here for now. Right, so now this is where things get interesting. Now when I start building everything that you see here, the our services section, best services, about us, everything. All right, but to be able to build any website layout and its content, you need to understand the CSS flexbox. All right, now CSS flexbox is a technique that is used to build website layouts and group elements within the website layout. So by layout, I mean the fundamental structure slash the shell or the skeleton of the website. So like I said on the previous tutorial, before you add content to your website, you need to be able to visualize it without any content. All right, so the layout is something like this and something like this. All right, so all the elements that you see in any websites are grouped inside div tags, aka dividers. Now dividers, like I said on the previous tutorials, are used to create sections within website and group elements within those sections, right? So for example, here I've got the sidebar section, we've got that main section which contains the videos, the actual videos, and you'll find out that inside these divs, inside these sections, we've got other divs as well to group content. All right, so that's what we're going to be looking at next, how to group. And once you know and understand flexbox and how to use it and how to group elements within website sections, I think you'll be one step closer to being a full like web developer. All right, so there's so much more to learn, but this is like the most important thing in web development, being able to lay out things and group elements within the sections and the subsections. All right, so yeah, we're going to be looking at flexbox, at the CSS flexbox on the next tutorial, but I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. We've seen on the previous tutorials that most HTML elements are block level elements, which means they take up the full space of their container. All right, in this case, the container is this grayish box here, and the content is the light gray box. All right, and again, containers are created using divs. All right, and by default, a div, aka a divider, is a block level element, which means it takes up the full space of its container by default. All right, to make that meaningful, let me actually demo that with HTML and CSS. All right, so let's define a new div here, aka a divider, and let's give it an ID of main container, and let's give it a text here. I'm gonna wrap the text around a p tag for paragraph, and let's just say this is the main container. Right, it's empty for now. So we want to give it a background color of so we're gonna tag it with ID. And let's want to set the background color to, let's say, gray. Now there it is, and let's set the height to, let's say, 150 pixels. Right, now there it is. Right, now let's go ahead and add, remember div, aka dividers, are used to create sections within a website and group content within those sections and subsections. All right, so what we're doing here is just for demoing purposes on how those sections and subsections are created. All right, so I want to create a new div here, and let's name it first we need to define it and give it an ID of let's say contents. All right, and let's give it a text as well, a paragraph. So I want to say this is the content. All right, and now let's target the content by ID. You want to say content, and let's set the background color to light gray and the height to 100 pixels. All right, there it is. As you can see, by default, it's taking up the full space of its entire container. All right, you can see the container. We give it a text of this is the main container. All right, so as we said, like on the previous tutorials, that whenever you want to change an element to force it to open up more space for other elements and not take up the full space of its container, you use the display property, and you set the display to inline block. All right, now there we go. You can also give the content a width, let's say 150 let's just say 200 pixels. All right, there we go. Now let's add another div here. Let's just say div id. Let's just say, let's give it an id of let's assume we want the first content to be on the left hand side of the screen, and we want the second content, the second div, to be on the right hand side. So let's give this div an id of right content, which means we want it to be on the right hand side. And let's say the div we want on the right hand side. Yeah, so you see it's not displaying on the right hand side. That's because it's taking up the full space of its container. So we need to set the display property to inline block. So now you can see that now that we've got a problem now with this display inline block. What if we had multiple divs here? That means we would have to target all of them and set the value to inline block. All right, you see, now that we gave it a value of display inline block, it's now appearing side by side with this div. Now what if we had like multiple divs here, like let's say 5 or 10 divs within this main container? We'd have to target all those divs and give it a value of inline block, and that is not efficient. That is not the efficient way of doing of laying out elements. As you can see, like on YouTube, they've got these multiple divs. Let's just increase the size. So they've got these multiple divs within this container, which you can see is behind the scenes. So we've got multiple divs. We'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes you can have more. So we can't use the display inline block to target multiple divs within a container. It's just inefficient. It's doable, but it's inefficient. That is where the CSS flexbox comes in, right? The CSS flexbox. All right. So let's just leave it here for now, and we'll have a look at the CSS flexbox on the next tutorial and see how the CSS flexbox works. All right, to position divs and elements efficiently within a website. All right, let's just leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. All right, so this is how the CSS flexbox works. All right, so you define the main container, aka the box, and you give it a CSS display value of flex. Now display flex will force all the content to display side by side. Now you no longer have to target each and every one of these containers and style them and force them to display side by side. The CSS display flex will do that for you. Right, remember I have to give the main container a value of display flex, right? So you target the main container, and as soon as you give the display value of flex, all the content will automatically display side by side. You no longer have to do the hard work of targeting them one by one and forcing them to display inline block / side by side. All right, so that is the CSS flex box. Now flex means flexible, means this is a flexible box, meaning this box is flexible, and there's so much more you can do with this CSS flex box. Can distribute spaces among the content evenly. There's so much more, but we're gonna look at what more can you do with the CSS flexbox later on. For now, let's just demonstrate this, what you see here with CSS and HTML. Alright, so I'm going to remove everything that we've done on the previous tutorial for demoing purposes. I'm just going to remove that and remove the style sheets for the boxes that we've defined previously. And we're going to define a new main container here, div with an ID of its main container. All right, and then I'm going to add content here. Let's just say div, let's just say content 1, content 2, content 3, content 4. Let's just change those. Content 3 and content 4. All right, now if we have a look here, they are not displaying side by side, right? Which is the point. We want to demonstrate the CSS flexbox. All right, you'll see as soon as we change the display value of the main container to display flex, they will display side by side. All right, for now, what I want to do, like, so that what we're doing is clear, let me just give the main box a background color of gray as usual. Right, there we go. And for the content, now let me introduce you to a new way of styling HTML elements. So whenever you have multiple elements and you want to give them the same style, you use the class selector. So in this case, I'm going to give the content divs a class of content. And I'm going to apply that to the second content, the third content, and the fourth content. All right, now I want to give all these elements the same background color, all these divs. So that's why I use the class attribute. All right, so just remember that whenever you want to give multiple elements the same style, you use the class property. The class attribute. All right, so now when using a class, instead of using the hash, prefixing it with a hash, you prefix it with a dot like that, followed by the class name. And now let's give him a background color of gray, light gray. And let's set the width to, let's say 10% of the entire container. Now you can see the divs, each content taking up 10% of the main container with a gray background. To make that even clear, let's just add a margin bottom between each content, margin bottom of 15 pixels. Right, and you see right now they're still taking up the full space of the entire container. See, each content is taking up the full space of the entire container. All right, but as soon as we give the main container, the gray main container, a value of display flex, you'll see they'll start displaying side by side. All right, and to make that even more meaningful, let's just add a margin left on each of this content. Margin left, let's say 15 pixels. Now, beautiful. You see that displaying side by side. Now, that is the power of the CSS flexbox. It forces elements inside the main container to display side by side without you having to target them with CSS and force them to display side by side, each and every one of those. The flexbox does that for you, forces all of them to display side by side. That is the CSS flexbox. Now that we know how the CSS flexbox and how it works, we're gonna start building this section of our site. All right, so you can see here we've got just visualize this as per what we've been doing. So I've got this main container here, and inside the main container I've got two divs, right? The div on the right hand side and the div on the left hand side. The div, remember, the div is the divider. All right, in this case the page is divided into two sections, right? The section on the right hand side and the section on the left hand side. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Alright guys, now let's go ahead and start building this section. Let's call it the experience section because it's talking about experience. We've got 30 years of experience in the industry, blah blah blah. All right, so if you visualize this as per what we've been doing on the previous tutorials, you can see we've got the main container which hosts the entire content, and then we've got let's call it the div for the content on the left hand side, and we've got a div for the content on the right hand side. All right, so first up, before we even add the content, the text and the images and everything else, we need to build the main container and the div that will contain the content on the left hand side and the div for the content on the right hand side. So let's build the main structure now of this section. All right, let's just remove everything else that we've been doing for demoing purposes, and let's remove the styles as well that we've been doing for demoing purposes. And like I said, we're gonna need to define the main div, the main container. All right, and so now we're defining this this div, the main container, the div with a light green background, and let's give it an ID of main container. Right, now let's go ahead and style it. So I'm gonna target it with the ID name, and always prefix the ID with a hash. And let's just set the height to, for testing purposes, let's just set it to 500 pixels, and let's set the background color to, let's say, light green. Is there light green? Yes, we're looking for that. Now let's go back and refresh and see what we have. Now we have the main container. All right, now let's go ahead and define the div, the content, the divs that will host the content. All right, so the div on the left hand side and the div on the right hand side. All right, so let me see. All right, so first we need to define first div, and let's just put a paragraph here for testing purposes. Paragraph that says the div on the left hand side. Right, and let's give it an ID of, let's say, left column. So we can kind of see this up. Sorry, I want to go back to, so we kind of see these as columns, right? Because they look like columns basically. All right, so let's name the div, the first div, left column, and we want to target it again by ID. And let's set the height to, let's say, the height to let's say 100 pixels, and the background color, let's set it to, let's see if we can use that. What color is that? Light. Let's just use that. And now if we refresh, it's taking up the full space of the entire container. And I guess you guessed it already, what we need to do to fix that. So to fix that, we're gonna use display flex on the main container. Remember, display flex kind of forces the content to display side by side. It forces the content not to take up the entire space. Now if we go back, the div is no longer taking up the entire space of its container. Sweet. All right, and let's just give it a width of let's say 40%. Oops, width 40%. And if we refresh, now it's taking up like 40% of the entire container. All right, and now let's go ahead and define the div on the right hand side, and let's put a paragraph here for testing purposes. Let's just say the div on the right hand side, and let's give it an ID of right column, and let's target it right column. Oops, need to capitalize that, right column, and the height, let's set it to 100 as well. Let's just copy that. The height want to set it to 100, the width want to set it to 40% as well. Let's use a different background color so we can like distinguish it from the first column. All right, background color, let's use light what this time? Light pink. Let's see. Why is it not this light pink? Why is it not? Oops. Oh, that should be right column with one eye, not with a double eye. Let's see. Now we have that column on the right hand side. All right, as you can see now, this kind of almost resembles this structure. All right, so the images will go on the first column, the text will go on the column that's on the right hand side. All right, we still have a couple of things to do, but I guess now you can see where we're going with this, and you can see the beauty of the CSS flexbox, right? You see with CSS flexbox, we targeted the main container and we set the display property to flex, and that forces the divs to display side by side like this. If I remove the flex property, now every div will take up the entire space of its container. They will display below each other. All right, so just remember that about the flex property, the CSS flex box. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. We still have a couple of things to do. We need to add content and we need to center these. As you can see, like on the original on the design, like the divs are centered, right? They're on the center of the screen. They're not like beginning from the far left of the screen. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. All right, guys, now let's go ahead and start building this section. Let's call it the experience section because it's talking about experience. We've got 30 years of experience in the industry, blah, blah, blah. All right, so if you visualize this as per what we've been doing on the previous tutorials, you can see we've got the main container which hosts the entire content, and then we've got let's call it the div for the content on the left hand side, and we've got a div for the content on the right hand side. All right, so first up, before we even add the content, the text and the images and everything else, we need to build the main container and the div that will contain the content on the left hand side and the div for the content on the right hand side. So let's build the main structure now of this section. All right, let's just remove everything else that we've been doing for demoing purposes, and let's remove the styles as well that we've been doing for demoing purposes. And like I said, we're gonna need to define the main div, the main container. All right, and so now we're defining this div, the main container, the div with a light green background, and let's give it an ID of main container. Right, now let's go ahead and style it. I'm gonna target it with the ID name, and always prefix the ID with a hash, and let's just set the height to, for testing purposes, let's just set it to 500 pixels, and let's set the background color to, let's say, light green. Is there light green? Yes, we're looking for that. Now let's go back and refresh and see what we have. Now we have the main container. All right, now let's go ahead and define the div, the content, the divs that will host the content. All right, so the div on the left hand side and the div on the right hand side. All right, so let me see. All right, so first we need to define the first div, and let's just put a paragraph here for testing purposes. Paragraph that says the div on the left hand side, right? And let's give it an ID of, let's say, left column. So we can kind of see this up. Sorry, I want to go back to, so we kind of see these as columns, right? Because they look like columns basically. All right, so let's name the div, the first div, left column, and we want to target it again by ID. And let's set the height to, let's say, the height to let's say 100 pixels, and the background color, let's set it to, let's see if we can use that. What color is that? Light. Let's just use that. And now if we refresh, it's taking up the full space of the entire container. And I guess you guessed it already, what we need to do to fix that. So to fix that, we're gonna use display flex on the main container. Remember, display flex kind of forces the content to display side by side. It forces the content not to take up the entire space. Now if we go back, the div is no longer taking up the entire space of its container. Sweet. All right, and let's just give it a width of let's say 40%. Oops, width 40%. And if we refresh, now it's taking up like 40% of the entire container. All right, and now let's go ahead and define the div on the right hand side, and let's put a paragraph here for testing purposes. Let's just say the div on the right hand side, and let's give it an ID of right column, and let's target it, right column. Oops, need to capitalize that, right column. And the height, let's set it to 100 as well. Let's just copy that. The height want to set it to 100, the width want to set it to 40% as well. Let's use a different background color so we can like distinguish it from the first column. All right, background color, let's use light what this time? Light pink. Let's see. Why is it not this light pink? Why is it not? Oops. Oh, that should be right column with one eye, not with a double eye. Let's see. Now we have the column on the right hand side. All right, as you can see now, this kind of almost resembles this structure. All right, so the images will go on the first column, the text will go on the column that's on the right hand side. All right, we still have a couple of things to do, but I guess now you can see where we're going with this, and you can see the beauty of the CSS flexbox, right? You see, with CSS flexbox, we targeted the main container and we set the display property to flex, and that forces the divs to display side by side like this. If I remove the flex property, Now every div will take up the entire space of its container. They will display below each other. All right, so just remember that about the flex property, the CSS flex box. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. We still have a couple of things to do. We need to add content and we need to center these. As you can see, like the on the original on the design, like the divs are centered, right? They're on the center of the screen. They're not like beginning from the far left of the screen. All right, I think let's leave it here for now. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Alright guys, so what you want to do next is to start adding content inside our container. So we're going to add the actual content. We're going to replace the text with the actual content. Right, first up, we're going to need to render this image, and then we'll render the text on the left hand side. Alright, so as you can see, the image will go inside the container or the div on the left hand side, and the text will go inside the container on the right hand side. Right, so if you're coding along and practicing along, you're gonna need to download this image. All right, so just right click. So I'm going to I've attached it to this section, all right, of the course. Just right click and select save as, and make sure you save it inside the folder where you are creating your website. All right, so I have the image already inside the green sword folder website already, so I can now go ahead and render it. Right, so by the way, the images will be given to you by your designer, right? Remember, I said whenever you build a website, you're going to need a designer to design the website for you. If you're working for a company, they will hire the designer, and the designer will give you the design and the images that you might need for the site. If you're self-employed, you're going to need to hire the designer, and they will give you the images. All right, so you don't have to worry about what image to use for what sections, or what image is going to look right on what section. All right, so they will tell you where what with image is right for which section. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and render the image on the left column. Right, so on this column, right, or container, let's call them containers. All right, right, so we learned on the previous tutorials that whenever you want to render an image, you use the image tag. Right, so you want to open your image tag, and the source is where you want to render the image from. And again, this can point to an image inside your site or an external image from another website. Right, so in this case, we want to render this image, so the source is about.jpg. All right, and remember, an image tag doesn't need a closing tag like the divs and the paragraphs. We just have one opening tag and no closing tag for the image. Right, so just keep that in mind. Now if we go back to our site, now we have the image. Now what you want to do next is to render this text on the right hand side. All right, so let's start with the headings. All right, so if you go to w3schools.html, w3schools/html/headings, you'll see that we've got different types of headings that we can use and different sizes. All right, so the h1 is the largest and the h3 is the smallest. All right, so let's just go with the h3, right? I think this will look fine. All right, so for the first heading, we're gonna use the h3. So let's just remove that. That was just for testing purposes. Let's replace it with h3, and we can just the text, let's just say since 2000. I can just copy the text, since 2000, and refresh. Now we have that, and let's copy the second heading, and want to open our heading tag and the closing tag. Now we have the headings. All right, so what we want to do next is to deal with the styling. First, we want to transform the text for since to capital letters. I'm going to give this number, this background color. All right, I don't know what color that is. I think it's lime, whatever, green, whatever. All right, and we're gonna need to give 30 this color. All right, lime green, whatever. All right, so by the way, let's just remove the background colors from the containers. That was just the background colors were just for testing purposes. All right. All right, so by the way, whenever you want to, let's say you don't want to completely remove something, but you don't want it to be effective, you can just press Control and /. That will comment it out. We call this commenting out in technical terms. All right, so comment that out. Now those will no longer be effective. All right, so if you want to keep it there but not make it effective, just use that. You can either type that out / star / now that will comment it out and it will no longer be effective. If you want to bring it back, you can just remove the / and the star by pressing Control /. First you want to select the thing that you want to remove like that, and then press Control /. If you want to bring it back, if you want to comment it out, right, just press the same Control /. All right, now if we go back to the site, now we no longer have the background colors, but we have the background color for the main container. All right, let's remove the background color for the main container as well. Right. All right, I think let's bring them back so we can kind of see what we're doing. Like, we're gonna remove them when we're almost done with adding the content. Right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one where we're gonna be adding these styles. All right, let's leave it here. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. All right, so on w3schools.com, we see that whenever you want to style a portion of a text, you use the span tag and give this whatever style you want to give it. Right, from this sentence, they're targeting this word blue, and they're giving it a text color of blue and a font size of bold. Right, so we see that whenever you want to target a portion of a text and style it, you use the span tag. All right, now let's go ahead and use the span tag to achieve this and that. All right, so back to our site. So inside, just want to place, scroll down, so I want to place the 2000 inside a span tag. Let's just drag it over. All right, now let's go ahead and give this h3 an identifier. So let's give it an ID of what should we name it? I think let's just name it since. We can name it anything, like as long as it makes sense. Right, now we'll be able to target this span tag inside this identifier, inside the since ID. All right, so let's just say, so we're targeting the span tag that is inside the since ID. Right, we could also use this ID, right column and then span. Now, but the problem with that, if we, like when you have another span here, because when I use another span to style the 30, right, but we don't want to give that 30 the same style as this span. Now if we target this using the right column span, now whatever style we'll give it will also affect the 30, and we don't want that. All right, so let's just go with since span. Now we know that we're specifically talking about the span inside this ID. All right, so let's give it a background color of, So the background color, it's actually that. Thanks God that this, yeah, it's actually the same as the header. And now let's have a look at what we have and refresh. There we go. Now what we want to do is to give it a like a bit of space on the left hand side and a bit of space on the right hand side. And for that, we're now going to use the padding, because whenever we want to control spaces between the content and the container, we use the padding. And in this case, the container is the entire span with the light green background, and the content is the text. All right, so let's give it a padding of back to our site. Padding top of, let's say, 5 pixels. Padding top 5 pixels. Yeah, it actually increased the padding on the top. Now let's give it a padding bottom 5 pixels. Yep, and now padding on the left hand side 5 pixels. We want to give it a 5 pixels. Let's just say, let's reference the design. It looks like it's 5 pixels and there's less space on the top and the bottom. All right, now padding right 5 pixels. All right, and yeah, we need to decrease the padding at the top and the padding bottom. All right, let's just decrease that to say 3 pixels. 3 pixels. I think that looks better. All right, now let's change the font's color. So we know whenever we want to change the font color, we use the color property. Remember, we don't have a font color, but we use the color property to change the font color. All right, let's set it to white. Right, the text is white. So by the way, whenever you want to use white, you can either use white, the word white, or you can use hash with the triple F. Now this is known as the hex value of the color, all right? And most of the times we use hex values instead of the color names. Right, you'll see, yeah, it's still white, all right? All right, what do you want to do next? All right, next up, I think we need to change, increase the font size a little bit. Let's set it to, say, 16 pixels and see. That's too small. Let's say, I think 23 will be fine. Yeah, I think that looks better. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Oh no, actually, let's style the 30 as well. All right. So we're gonna give it a span, and let's move it over to inside the span. I wanna give the h3 an identifier, and let's name it. What should we name it? Let's just name it years of experience. By the way, yeah, like I suck at naming these things, but you can always give it any name as long as it makes sense to you. All right. Now, let's go ahead and target the span inside this identifier. All right. So for that, you're going to prefix the ID with a hash and specify the span. And let's give it a color of, yeah, we actually want to give it that color. And now we have that. Now let's increase the font size for the years. So for the years, So I want to increase the font size for everything that's inside this identifier, all right? Not just the span, all right? So let's just say, yes, font size, let's set it to 23 pixels. Yeah, that looks better. By the way, I think we need to, we need to increase the font size for the text as well here, not just the number, all right? So we need to move that, the font size, we need to move it over to a new style. Now that will target everything, including the text, not just the span. Yeah, now you see the since text has grown. All right, let's leave it here for now. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.